He searched every room. The nursery? Empty. The kitchen? Empty. The entire mansion, silent. No sign of his maid, no sign of his baby. His heart started to race. Kevin Grant had built empires, moved markets, and controlled everything in his world, except this moment. Then he stepped outside, and what he saw stopped him cold. There, on a stone bench, in the biting morning air, was Gloria, asleep, still in uniform, arms wrapped tightly around baby Emily. A faded blue blanket covered the child, and Gloria's yellow cleaning gloves were still clinging to her hands. Neither of them stirred. For a second he couldn't breathe. Then he saw Emily's tiny chest rise, her fingers curled into Gloria's apron, and on Gloria's face a quiet kind of peace. He didn't understand it. Not yet. But what looked like recklessness was something else entirely, and that moment changed everything. The sky hadn't turned yet. It was still dark in Manhattan. Street lamps flickered against stone buildings, and the wind carried that early-hour stillness, the kind that makes you feel every second of silence. Kevin Grant stood on the marble steps of his estate, barefoot, tense. The cold bit at his skin. But it wasn't the cold that made him shiver. It was the emptiness. He had already checked the nursery. No baby. He'd called the nanny. No answer. Walked every hallway. But the one person who always kept things running, Gloria, his quiet, invisible maid, was nowhere to be found. Then, a flicker of movement near the garden. He stepped off the porch, heart pounding, breath shallow. It wasn't supposed to be like this, not in his house, not in his world. And then he saw her. Gloria, curled up on the garden bench, back leaned against the cold stone, eyes closed, breathing steady. In her arms, Emily. The baby was wrapped in an old blanket, tucked so closely into Gloria's chest it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Kevin froze. The yellow gloves were still on Gloria's hands, her head tilted back, her arm locked around the child like instinct, like protection. He took a step closer. No words, no reaction. Emily's fingers clung to Gloria's uniform, her tiny face nestled into the space just below Gloria's chin. Safe. Too safe for this to be an accident. Kevin didn't know why, he didn't know how. But he knew one thing, this wasn't neglect, it was love. Not the kind you buy, the kind you carry, even when it breaks you. And in that still, cold moment, everything Kevin believed about love, family, and what it means to protect something began to crack. But before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story makes you believe that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding our world together. The air hung thick with silence, not peace, not calm, just that heavy kind of stillness you feel when something's not right. Kevin stood frozen beside the garden path, his breath caught halfway between fear and disbelief. Gloria didn't stir. Neither did the baby. He stepped closer. Slowly. The gravel crunched beneath his bare feet. The closer he got, the stranger it all felt. The bench was damp with morning frost. The blanket barely covered Emily's legs. And Gloria. She looked like she hadn't meant to sleep, just hadn't had the strength to stay awake. Her arms were still wrapped around the baby, one yellow-gloved hand tucked under Emily's back, the other across her tiny chest, as if shielding her from the wind. Kevin's mind raced. Why was his daughter out here? Why didn't anyone wake him? Where was the stuff? Why didn't she knock on his door? But none of those questions made it past his lips, because in that moment, all he could see was the way Emily's small body rose and fell gently against Gloria's. Safe. He crouched beside them, carefully. His hand hovered near the child's back, unsure whether to lift her or let her stay. Gloria's eyes fluttered. She blinked, dazed, then saw him. She jolted upright, panic flashing across her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, breathless. He held up a hand, not in anger, just confusion. "Why?" That was all he could manage. Gloria looked down at Emily, then back at him. Her voice cracked. "She was cold, sir. The heat, it stopped working. She cried for hours. I didn't know what else to do." She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain beyond that. She just said it. And Kevin, who had always believed every problem had a solution, every mistake a price, felt something inside him shift. Gloria wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't even trying to be forgiven. She was just tired. Tired in a way no amount of sleep could fix. He looked at her one last time, really looked, at the circles under her eyes, at the trembling in her arms, at the way she hadn't let go of Emily, even in sleep. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel rich, not at all. Kevin stood there, unmoving. The wind had picked up, brushing past the marble columns behind him, but his eyes stayed fixed on the yellow glove still resting against his daughter's back, and on the quiet woman who had been invisible in his home until this very moment. Gloria didn't look up again. She just sat there silent, arms still wrapped around Emily, like a mother clinging to something she couldn't afford to lose twice. Kevin swallowed hard. He didn't know what emotion was hitting him. Guilt, shock, or something far less familiar. All he knew was that he didn't want to raise his voice. Not here. Not now. He stepped back. Gently. His hand brushed across the top of the blanket, just enough to feel the warmth still trapped inside it. It wasn't much, but it had been enough to keep his child safe. And the gloves, still on Gloria's hands, bright yellow, a little torn at the fingertips, smudged with polish and dust. She hadn't even taken them off. Kevin's mind went back to the night before, the text from the staff group chat he hadn't answered, the subtle drop in the thermostat reading he'd dismissed. He remembered walking past the nursery door on his way out, hearing Emily cry and thinking she'd settle soon. He hadn't stopped. He hadn't checked. Now he was here, outside, barefoot, standing beside a bench in the freezing dark, watching the woman he paid to clean his house cradle the only thing in his life that ever truly mattered. Gloria finally spoke again. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't want her to cry anymore. She kept her eyes on the child. Not once did she ask for understanding. Not once did she explain herself with pride. She just sat there still, as if ready for whatever judgment would come next. Kevin took a breath, the kind that shakes a little on the way out. I didn't know the heat broke. Gloria nodded slowly. I called maintenance. No one came. A pause. You were at the gala. He didn't remember much about the fundraiser, only that the champagne had been warm and the conversations colder. I was going to rock her, Gloria said, just until she settled. Just for a few minutes. Her voice broke. I didn't mean to fall asleep. Kevin looked down at the child in her arms, now stirring softly, eyelids fluttering. He didn't have words for what he felt, only questions. And most of them weren't for her. They were for himself. He didn't ask her to stand, didn't tell her to explain. He just said quietly, "Come inside." She hesitated. Her arms tightened around the baby, as if part of her believed this was the last time she'd be allowed to hold her. But Kevin didn't reach. He didn't rush. He simply turned and led the way, leaving the front door wide open behind him. She followed. The marble floors felt colder than the bench. The silence inside the house, deeper than it had been outside. Kevin gestured to a seat in the kitchen, not the servants' table tucked behind the pantry, the main one. He didn't sit at first. He just watched as Gloria gently lowered Emily into the bassinet beside the counter, brushing the blanket into place like it was made of gold. Then she sat, still wearing the gloves. She kept her hands folded in her lap. Didn't speak. Didn't blink. Kevin pulled out the chair across from her and finally asked, "Who taught you how to hold a child like that?" A long pause, then she answered, "My daughter." His body stilled. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at a small crack in the tile. Her voice was even, but quiet. Too quiet. "Her name was Ava," she said. "She was 2. Kevin didn't move, not even to breathe. "She got sick one winter," Gloria continued. "We didn't have heat. Couldn't afford to keep it running all night. I bundled her up best I could. She pressed her hands together until her knuckles went white. She had a fever. I tried to bring it down. Wet towels, cold rags. I stayed up holding her, just like I held Emily tonight. I prayed she'd make it to morning. Her throat tightened. But when I woke up, she was gone. She looked up then just once, and Kevin saw it. The grief she carried like breath. I failed her. 3 words. That's all. But they landed harder than anything he'd heard in years. And since that day, she whispered, I told myself like if I ever held another child, I wouldn't let go, not for anything, not even sleep. Silence filled the room again, except this time, it was sacred. Kevin glanced at the bassinet. Emily was still sleeping, and he realized something that pulled at a part of him he didn't know existed. This woman hadn't just saved his child. She was still trying to save her own. He didn't speak for a long time, not because he didn't have words, but because none of them felt worthy. Gloria sat still across the table, eyes lowered, hands folded, gloves still on. The same gloves she wore to scrub the marble floors, the same hands that had held his baby like something irreplaceable. Kevin stood quietly and walked to the edge of the room. He didn't know why. Maybe to breathe, maybe to hide the sting behind his eyes. He'd never asked about her life, never wondered where she went after hours, never noticed when she skipped breaks or stayed late. She was just there, like the furniture, like the silence. But that morning something shifted. He found himself watching her. Later that day, as the sun pushed through the kitchen windows, he passed by the nursery door and paused. Gloria was inside, holding Emily again. Not because she had to, she had already worked through the night, but because Emily reached for her. Her small hands gripped Gloria's collar like instinct, like trust. Gloria rocked gently in the chair by the window, humming low, brushing her fingers across the baby's cheek with the kind of care you can't fake. The kind that doesn't clock out. Kevin didn't go in. He just watched. He watched her fold baby clothes on the floor, one tiny sock at a time. Watched her pick up dropped toys with a patience no one taught her. Watched her rub circles on Emily's back until the child melted into her chest like she belonged there. That night he checked the time cards. Gloria hadn't taken a single day off in almost 7 months. No complaints, no requests. She just showed up, did her job, and somewhere in the cracks of routine, gave his daughter the one thing he hadn't: presence. He thought about the baby's first laugh. He hadn't been home. The first time she crawled. He'd seen it on a nanny cam. But Gloria, she was there. Always there. And for the first time in his life, Kevin Grant, who had built a life on strategy, data, and distance, felt completely, uncomfortably close. Not to failure, but to truth, because the woman he'd barely noticed had been holding his daughter's heart in her hands all along, and somewhere deep inside, he wondered how many more moments he had missed, because he hadn't known what love really looked like. The house was warmer now, not because of the heat, because Kevin had started noticing things. He walked slower through the halls, listened more during breakfast, found himself standing outside the nursery door more often than he used to. But while something in him was softening, not everyone in the house saw it that way. They saw Gloria, and they whispered, "She's too close to the child." Crossing lines. "She's the maid, not the mother." The words floated through the kitchen, folded into side glances, and carried by voices that never said anything to her face. But Gloria heard them. She always heard them. She moved a little quieter after that. Took longer to knock before entering rooms. Avoided eye contact when she handed Emily over. One afternoon, Kevin's sister stopped by. She was holding a glass of wine, eyes sharp. "You trust her too much," she said casually, like it was an observation, not an accusation. "She sleeps in staff quarters. She works all hours. You're blurring lines, Kevin." He didn't respond right away, because deep down, he knew it wasn't lines that were being blurred. It was something deeper than rules, something no policy could explain. That night, Gloria stayed later than usual. Emily had a fever, mild. But Gloria didn't leave her side. When the baby finally drifted off, Gloria slipped out of the room, quiet as ever. She walked down the hall, past the kitchen, and stopped, because there it was again, her name, spoken in a tone that wasn't kind. She thinks she belongs here. She's trying to be something she's not. Gloria didn't cry. She didn't go back to her quarters. She went to the laundry room, sat on the wooden bench near the dryer, hands folded, heart heavy. The next morning, Kevin found a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't long. Just a thank you, a goodbye, and a quiet promise that she didn't want to cause trouble. Her small suitcase was already packed by the door. She didn't want to be talked about, didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to stay where she wasn't wanted. But before she could reach the gate, Kevin was already waiting, Emily in his arms. No words at first, just the wind between them. Then, softly, "You don't leave the place you belong." He stepped closer, placing the baby gently back in Gloria's arms. "You're not just her nanny," his voice broke. "You're her heart." The house was asleep. For once there were no whispers, no questions, no lines being drawn in quiet corners. Gloria was still awake. She always was. She sat beside the crib, watching Emily breathe. One soft rise, one soft fall. The fever from the day before had passed, or so they thought. But then, a sound, not a cry, not a whimper, just silence. Too long, too still. Gloria leaned over the crib, her breaths short, labored, her tiny hands twitching beneath the blanket. Panic hit fast, but Gloria didn't scream. She lifted the baby gently into her arms and held her close. Kevin was already on his way. Something in him had pulled him from sleep. He turned the hallway corner just as Gloria opened the nursery door. He saw her face first, and then the baby. "Call a doctor," she said, voice shaking. He didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. Within 20 minutes the nursery was full. Machines, wires, cold voices, urgent orders. Kevin stood near the window, helpless. Money moved fast, but not fast enough. Nothing was working. The fever climbed. Emily's skin turned pale. Her breath slowed again. Kevin looked at the doctor, and in that brief second of eye contact, he saw fear, real fear. And then Gloria stepped forward. She didn't ask. She didn't wait. She reached for Emily. At first the nurse protested, but Kevin nodded. Let her. Gloria sat in the rocking chair, the same one by the window where she always sang. She held the baby tight against her chest, like that first night on the bench. Her voice cracked as she began to hum. Not a lullaby from a children's book, but a hymn. Old, southern, barely above a whisper. The same one she used to sing to Ava. Tears slid down her face onto Emily's tiny hands. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She rocked and sang and prayed without words. Kevin stood across the room, frozen. The machines kept beeping. But something changed. Emily's chest began to rise a little steadier. Her skin flushed with warmth again. Her tiny fingers gripped the edge of Gloria's blouse. The fever so began to break. The doctor didn't speak. No one did. There was nothing to say. Because what had saved that child wasn't found in medicine or money. It was in the arms of a woman who had already lost everything once and refused to lose it again. The next evening the dining room was full. Long table, crystal glasses, heavy silverware. Kevin rarely called family dinners, and never with the staff present. But tonight, everyone was there. His sister, his mother, his chief of staff, the housekeeper, the butler, and at the far end, Gloria, still in uniform, still unsure why she was seated among them. She sat with her hands in her lap, shoulders pulled in, as if she might vanish if no one looked directly at her. Kevin stood at the head of the table, silent. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, his voice cut through the air, low, steady. "Last night, My daughter almost died. Fawkes froze. Eyes turned. But she didn't, he continued. And not because of doctors, or machines, or anything I paid for. He looked at Gloria. She lived because someone loved her enough to hold her through it. The room shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else stared at their plate. Gloria didn't move. She held Emily, Kevin said. When I couldn't. He paused. I was busy. With business. With events. With everything I thought made me important. He looked around the table. But this woman, his voice cracked slightly, held the one thing that truly mattered. And she did it not because it was her job, but because she loved her. A gasp. Somewhere near the middle of the table. But Kevin kept going. She wrapped my child in her arms and risked her own health to keep her warm. She stayed awake for nights. She listened when she cried. She sang to her, prayed over her. And his eyes returned to Gloria. Then he did something none of them expected. He walked to her side and knelt. Right there, beside the maid. The marble floor didn't matter. The room full of eyes didn't matter. He looked up at her, voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for saving my daughter. A pause. And for teaching me what it actually means to be a father. Gloria's lips parted, but no words came. Only tears. She shook her head, unsure what to do, how to respond. But Kevin wasn't waiting for approval. He turned back to the table. She's not just the help, he said firmly. She's family. The room sat still. No one objected. No one dared. Because in that moment, even the ones who used to whisper finally saw her. The mansion felt different now. Not louder, not busier, just warmer. The silence that once echoed off marble floors was slowly being replaced by humming in the kitchen, by soft baby laughter, by the quiet rhythm of love settling into a place it had never been allowed to live. Kevin started working from home more, not because he had less to do, but because he had something worth staying for. He watched the little moments now, the ones he used to walk past, like the way Emily giggled when Gloria kissed her nose, the way Gloria tucked her into naps with the kind of gentleness that couldn't be taught, the way Emily reached for her in the mornings before she reached for anyone else. One morning Kevin stepped into the nursery, holding something in his hand. Small, gold. Gloria was rocking Emily, whispering the tail end of a lullaby. She looked up as he entered. Not startled, just curious. He walked over and handed her the box. I don't want this to feel like a gift, he said softly, because it's not about thanks. Gloria looked down. Inside the box, a delicate gold necklace, a tiny heart hanging at the center. She blinked. I can't accept this, she said, her voice already trembling. You don't have to, he replied, but I hope you will. She held the chain in her palm, eyes fixed on the heart. For the woman, Kevin said, who kept mine beating. She tried to speak, but her voice caught somewhere between shock and tears. I don't need anything, she whispered. Kevin smiled gently. I know. That's why you deserve everything. He helped her clasp it around her neck. Nothing else was said. There didn't need to be. Later that afternoon, Emily took her first wobbly steps across the nursery rug. Gloria clapped quietly, kneeling to catch her. The toddler fell into her arms, laughing. Mama G! It was the first time she said it. Clear, unprompted, as if she'd always known the words. Gloria froze. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She just held the child close and let herself breathe. For the first time in years, not like someone passing through, not like help, but like someone who belonged. And behind her, standing in the doorway. Kevin didn't say a word. He just smiled, because for the first time, his house felt like a home. Years passed, the seasons changed outside the gates, but inside the home, something sacred remained. Emily grew quickly, a little taller each spring, a little braver each fall. She scraped knees in the courtyard, painted handprints on hallway walls, learned to tie her shoes in the laundry room where Gloria used to hum lullabies. And Gloria. She stayed, through bedtime stories and school uniforms, through first words, first fevers, first questions about the world. She never asked for more. She just showed up, day after day. Heart open, arms steady. They called her Mama G without needing to explain why. Even the staff followed suit. And Kevin, he no longer walked through the halls with phone in hand. He knew now that the most important things couldn't be scheduled. They had to be witnessed. He sat in the garden more often now, beside the old stone bench, the one he once found too cold to notice. Now, it was sacred. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Emily, now 7, sat beside Gloria on that very bench. Her legs dangled. Her voice carried stories of school and friends and playground drama. Gloria smiled, her hands folded softly in her lap. The golden necklace still rested against her chest, worn now, but never removed. Kevin watched from the balcony, arms crossed gently, eyes a little misty. He knew this chapter of their lives was growing shorter. Gloria had started to slow down. She no longer cleaned, didn't have to. Her presence was no longer tied to duty. It was woven into the walls, into every photo, every corner, every memory that mattered. One morning, Emily was asked at school, "Who raised you?" She didn't hesitate. "My dad," she said, "and my Mama G." Simple. True. Unshaken. That evening, Emily climbed into Gloria's lap with a book she could now read herself, but she still asked Gloria to turn the pages, because some things aren't about need. They're about love and staying close. Outside, the garden lights flickered on, and for a moment, the house, once echoing with emptiness, felt full of stories, of second chances, of hearts that never stopped holding on. Kevin stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at them, and in a voice low, meant for no one but memory, he whispered, "I used to think love was something you earned." He paused. "But the woman who had the least gave us the most." A breath. And we'll never forget that. "Jiggy!" Adrian Russell froze. At the sink, crying like something inside her had broken, was a woman he didn't recognize. Her back was trembling, her hands gripped the counter, and wrapped around her like he'd been born there was Joe, his son. Legs locked around her waist, arms around her neck. Adrian's voice caught in his throat. The teddy bear he'd brought from Manhattan slipped from his hand and hit the tile. 3 weeks away, and this is what he came home to. Not a daddy, not a hug, not even a glance. Just his boy, clinging to a stranger, crying like the world had ended. The woman turned slowly, tear-streaked face, eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "He won't let go." Joe's tiny voice broke through the silence. "Don't take her, Daddy. Please." Adrian's world shifted, right there, under kitchen lights and heartbreak. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to say. Adrian hadn't expected fanfare. He knew Joe might be shy after 3 weeks, knew he might need time to warm up, but he imagined something, a smile, a small run toward him, a giggle, not silence, not sobbing, and certainly not this woman. He tried to speak, tried to find his voice somewhere beneath the jet lag and the cold shock, but his mouth stayed dry. His eyes stayed on his son, whose small fingers were now twisted tightly into the folds of the woman's apron. The last time Adrian held him, it was in a glass hotel suite in San Francisco. Joe had waved goodbye on FaceTime, lips puckered to the screen. Now he wouldn't even look at him. "I'm Priscilla," the woman said softly, her arms gently supporting Joe's weight. "We spoke. The agency sent me." He searched his memory. There had been a voicemail. Something about a last-minute change. He hadn't followed up. Joe's shoulders shook. His breath came out in small, broken gasps against her neck. Priscilla didn't flinch. She didn't ask him to let go. She just held him, like she'd been doing it for a while. Adrian stepped forward, slowly. The teddy bear still lay on the floor behind him, forgotten. "I brought this for you," he said, voice unsure. Joe didn't respond. Priscilla swallowed hard. He has nightmares. Almost every night. Her voice cracked, but she held it steady. I stay with him until he can fall asleep again. Adrian felt the weight of those words land in his chest. Heavy. Unforgiving. He remembered an email flagged as not urgent. He never opened it. Joe pressed his face deeper into her shoulder, as if he could hide from the world and from his father. Adrian took another step, then stopped. He wasn't sure if he had the right to come any closer. Before we continue, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. I hope this video makes you believe kindness comes from the heart. Adrian's jaw tightened. The silence between them felt louder than the sobs. He took a breath. Steady, practiced. Joe, he said again, softer this time. It's me, buddy. Daddy's home. Joe flinched but didn't move. Adrian's eyes flicked to Priscilla. Her grip on the boy hadn't loosened. He didn't like the way that made him feel. I'd like to speak to you, he said, eyes narrowing slightly. Alone. Priscilla's spine straightened, but she didn't move either. He doesn't want me to let go, she said quietly. I tried. He cried harder. Adrian stared at her. Why was he crying in the first place? She hesitated, just for a second. Then her voice landed flat, without drama. Because he told me he wished I was his mom. The words hung like smoke in the air. Adrian blinked. What? Priscilla's eyes glistened, but her face stayed calm. He misses something. I just happened to be here when he needed someone. Joe let out a shaky breath. Priscilla's hand moved gently along his back, almost without thinking. It wasn't rehearsed. It was muscle memory. Adrian took a slow step forward. I didn't know things had gotten this bad. You weren't here to know, she said, almost apologetically. Neither was I at first. I was supposed to just clean. She looked at him now. Really looked. No fear. Just honesty. But then I heard him crying through the walls. First night. Then the next. And the next. Eventually, she glanced down at Joe. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. Adrian's stomach churned. Guilt crept in, quiet and sharp. Joe finally lifted his head, just slightly. His cheeks were blotchy, his lashes wet. He looked at Adrian with the kind of fear only a child can carry. The kind that says, You left me. Will you leave again? Adrian stepped back. He couldn't answer that yet. Adrian leaned against the counter, one hand gripping the edge like it might anchor him. Priscilla's eyes followed his movement, not accusing, just waiting. He has nightmares, Adrian asked, quieter now. She nodded. Almost every night. He wakes up calling for someone. Anyone. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. I tried to just leave the light on at first. I thought maybe he'd settle, but... She looked down at the boy in her arms. He didn't. Adrian's throat tightened. He tells me stories, she went on. Little pieces of you, your office, your plane, the teddy bear, how you said you'd be back soon. She let the silence breathe before finishing. But then he asks why soon takes so long. Adrian swallowed hard. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the air had thickened. I didn't know the nanny quit, he murmured. You missed the agency's follow-up, she replied gently. They said you were too busy to speak. He didn't argue, couldn't. Priscilla adjusted Joe slightly, her hand never leaving his back. I didn't try to replace anyone, she said. I just stayed. When he cried, I stayed. Joe sniffled against her shoulder, still quiet, still watching his father from a safe distance. He asked if I could sing to him, said his old nanny used to before she left. So I did. Just a lullaby my grandmother sang to me when I was small. Her tone stayed simple. She wasn't defending herself, just laying truth bare. Adrian looked at his son, his boy, who once couldn't fall asleep without a bedtime call from him. Now he found peace in a stranger's voice. That stranger was no longer a stranger, not to Joe. Adrian opened his mouth but said nothing. What was there to say? Joe reached up, pulling Priscilla's arm tighter around his small frame. His eyes never left Adrian's, and in that long, aching gaze, Adrian saw it. The question behind the quiet, "Where were you when I needed you?" Adrian stepped out of the kitchen, not out of anger, not to avoid them. He just needed space to breathe. The hallway felt colder than he remembered, quiet, but not peaceful. It echoed now. He stopped beside the grand staircase, the one Joe used to race down in socks, laughing, calling for him. That laugh hadn't filled these walls in a while. Adrian leaned against the banister, loosening his tie like it might loosen the knot in his chest. 3 weeks, that's all it had been, but the gap between them felt like miles. He'd been in conference rooms, talking over lawyers and pitching CEOs on vision, in penthouses with skyline views, drinking to another closed deal. He told himself it was for Joe, that one day his son would understand. But Joe didn't want understanding. He wanted someone who showed up at bedtime, someone who noticed when the nightmares started, someone who stayed. Adrian rubbed a hand over his face. His skin felt unfamiliar, tight with regret. He thought money could buy him time, buy him grace, buy him out of mistakes. But Joe wasn't a client. He was an investment, a scared little boy who had cried loud enough for a stranger to hear him through the walls. And that stranger answered, not with permission, not with pay, just with presence. Adrian didn't know what hurt more, the fact that Joe found comfort in someone else, or the fact that Adrian had left him needing it. A faint sound from the kitchen pulled him back. A hiccup, a soft whisper. Joe's voice, still clinging. Adrian pushed off the banister. Whatever came next. He couldn't stand in the hallway anymore. Adrian stepped back into the kitchen. The room hadn't changed, but something in him had. Joe was still in Priscilla's arms, his face tucked tight against her collar. His fingers curled in the fabric like letting go would break something inside him. Adrian paused near the doorway, then slowly lowered himself, down to eye level. No suit, no title, no distance, just a father. Trying. He opened his arms. Not wide, not dramatic, just open. "Joe," he said gently. "Hey, buddy, I'm here now, if you want to come." Joe didn't move. His small body shifted slightly, eyes peeking out, red-rimmed, unsure. No leap, no smile, only silence. Then slowly he began to slide down from Priscilla's hold, one hand still gripping her apron, the other reaching forward like he was testing the air between them. His steps were small, careful, as if the floor might give way. When he reached Adrian, he didn't run, he leaned, pressed his body into his father's chest without a word. Adrian caught him, arms wrapping around him like something sacred. "I'm sorry," he whispered into Joe's hair. "I should have been here." Joe didn't speak, but he didn't let go either. His small arms tightened slightly. Then, barely audible, came the plea. "Don't make her leave." Adrian's throat tightened. He looked up at Priscilla, who stood frozen, hands twisting her apron, eyes wide with fear she couldn't hide. Adrian held his son close, then spoke, not just to her, but to the weight hanging in the room. "I don't want her to leave either." His voice shook. "I thought I hired a maid," he said, "but it looks like he found someone who showed up when I didn't." Priscilla didn't respond. Not yet. But the tears in her eyes said enough. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The house was still. Joe had fallen asleep curled on the couch, one small hand resting on the teddy bear Adrian almost forgot he brought. In the kitchen, the lights were lower now, softer, less interrogation, more confession. Priscilla stood at the stove, quietly wiping down the surface, not rushing, not lingering, just moving. Adrian leaned against the doorway, watching her. His voice, when it came, was careful. "You didn't have to stay all those nights." She kept wiping, eyes on her hands. "I couldn't pretend he was fine, not when he wasn't." Adrian stepped in, not too close. "I should have known. About the nightmares. About all of it." Priscilla turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "I didn't expect to matter this much," she said, almost like she was admitting a mistake. "I didn't come here to be anything more than what I was hired for." Adrian nodded slowly. "I know." He paused, then added, "But you were here when it counted, and that means more than I can say." Her eyes flicked to his, just once, then back to the cloth in her hand. He took a breath. "If you ever want more, childcare courses, school, anything, just say the word, I'll support it." She froze, the cloth stilled between her fingers. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because you helped my son breathe again," he said. "And I didn't even notice he was suffocating." She blinked, swallowed. "I wasn't trying to take anyone's place." "I know," he said, "but you showed up like someone who could have." For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the faint rhythm of Joe's breathing in the next room, steady now, like it hadn't been in weeks. Priscilla nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Adrian nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. The next morning came slow. Grey light filtered through linen curtains. Rain tapped softly on the windows. Priscilla stood near the dining table, folding laundry with practiced calm. The kind of movement that asked for no attention but deserved it. Adrian poured coffee across the room, watching her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She paused but didn't turn. "Of course." "When did it stop feeling like just a job?" The question landed quietly. She folded a small t-shirt, smoothing the fabric with her palm. "Probably the second night," she said. "He called out for someone. No name. Just a cry." She looked up. "I didn't plan to go in. I sat outside his door for almost an hour, thinking I should wait, that someone else would come." Adrian's stomach tightened. "No one did," she added. "So I did." He nodded slowly, walked over, leaned against the edge of the table. "This house doesn't make it easy to feel like you belong," he admitted. She gave a faint smile. "It wasn't built for warmth." He studied her. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "You don't work for me anymore. You work with me, with us." Priscilla looked at him then, really looked. A mix of relief and doubt flickered in her eyes. "I don't want to overstep," she said. "I don't want him to get attached and then—" She trailed off. The "and then" didn't need finishing. Adrian understood. "You didn't force that bond," he said. "You earned it, and I won't take it away from him." Priscilla folded the last shirt and set it down. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed, just slightly. Neither of them said it out loud, but something had shifted. The title had changed. The line had blurred. And in that blur, something unexpected was starting to take root. The smell of burnt toast drifted through the hallway before the sound of the smoke alarm ever did. Adrian fumbled with the toaster, waving away the thin trail of smoke like it might erase the evidence. Joe sat at the counter, legs swinging, chin resting on one hand, watching, amused. Priscilla walked in, towel in hand, eyes already knowing. "I was trying," Adrian said, half defensive, half defeated. She took the bread from his hand, gently opened the trash can, and dropped it in without a word. "Try the stove next time," she said softly. "It listens better." Joe giggled. Adrian turned to him. "Traitor." The boy grinned, mouth full of cereal. It was the first real smile Adrian had seen in weeks. No hesitation, no hiding. He didn't say anything, just watched his son chew, the bowl between small hands, the teddy bear seated beside him like an honored guest. Priscilla cracked 2 eggs into a pan, her movements easy now, familiar. Adrian stepped aside, gave her space. He didn't know what this morning was exactly, but it felt right, or at least like a start. Joe reached for Adrian's hand with one of his own, and Priscilla's with the other. No words, just connection. They stood like that for a moment, silent, 3 hands tangled across a breakfast counter that had never felt this full. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something else had begun. Adrian looked at his son, then at the woman he almost overlooked. "I almost missed this," he whispered. Priscilla didn't answer. She just placed the eggs on a plate, slid them toward him and said, "Don't burn these." A week had passed. No more midnight cries, no more calls through the walls, just the soft hum of a house learning how to breathe again. Adrian sat on the living room floor, legs crossed, Joe asleep against his chest, one hand on the boy's back, rising and falling with every steady breath. The TV played low in the background, some old cartoon neither of them had really been watching. They hadn't needed it. Across the room, Priscilla sat on the rug, flipping through a picture book. She wasn't reading out loud, just turning pages, quietly, like she didn't want to wake anyone. Or maybe like she didn't want the moment to end. Adrian looked at her. She met his gaze. No tension, no fear, only a calm understanding that hadn't been there before. He gently adjusted Joe, cradling the boy closer. "He sleeps better now," he said. Priscilla nodded. "He trusts the quiet again." Adrian rested his chin on his son's head. "I took time off," he said, cleared the calendar. Her eyes widened slightly. "For how long?" "I don't know yet," he answered, "but long enough to matter." Silence settled. Not heavy, just full. Adrian looked around, at the couch still dented from a day of cartoons, the blanket Joe refused to let go of, the plate of half-eaten grapes Priscilla had cut up hours ago. This wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but for the first time, it felt like home. He reached out, slid the picture book closer to him. Joe stirred but didn't wake. "You still want to take those classes?" he asked. Priscilla hesitated. "I might." "You'll have whatever you need," he said, "and not just because of Joe, but because people who show up should be seen." She blinked. Once. Then gave the smallest smile. "I'm not going anywhere." Adrian nodded. Neither was he. Sometimes love doesn't arrive dressed the way you expect. Sometimes it shows up in an apron, in lullabies sung through cracked doors, in the hands that never pulled away. And if you're lucky, you learn to stay. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, or even just a moment of stillness, don't leave quietly. At Elevated Heart Stories, we share real moments that move hearts and open eyes. So take a second to subscribe, like this video, and let us know where in the world you're watching from, because your voice might be the light someone else is waiting for. Until next time, stay kind, stay human, and keep your heart elevated. Michelle's hand trembled as she moved the light in front of Ava's face. The little girl's eyes followed it. Michelle's breath caught. "That's impossible. Every doctor said Ava Hudson was born blind. No cure, no hope, no chance." But her eyes just tracked the light. And in that moment, Michelle realized something that made her blood run cold. This child wasn't born broken. Someone was breaking her. Julian Hudson's wife died the day their daughter was born. Emily didn't survive the delivery. And before Julian could even process the loss, doctors told him his newborn baby would never see. Born blind, permanently, no explanation. He tried everything. Top specialists, experimental treatments, different hospitals across the country. They all said the same thing: nothing could be done. So Julian took Ava home to a house that felt like a tomb. 4 years passed in silence, curtains always closed, medication given 3 times a day, like clockwork, a routine that led nowhere. Ava didn't smile, didn't reach for toys, didn't turn towards sounds. She just sat by the window, staring at a world she'd never see. And Julian watched his daughter fade a little more every day. Then Michelle Davies answered his ad for a caregiver. 6 months earlier, Michelle had buried her infant son, 11 days old. The grief gutted her completely. She couldn't go back to nursing, couldn't face those NICU rooms without falling apart, but she needed something to hold on to. So she took the job. The first time Michelle held Ava's hand, the little girl squeezed back. Michelle had worked with blind children before. That response felt different, too aware, too connected. She started paying closer attention. The way Ava's head would turn when Michelle entered the room, not toward sound, but toward movement. The way she'd blink when light hit her face. the way she'd smile when the sun came through the window. Then, one afternoon, Michelle came home and heard soft crying from the laundry room. She opened the door. Ava was sitting on the floor in the shadows, reaching desperately toward a thin crack of light, her eyes following it as it moved. Michelle knelt down, waved her hand through the beam. Ava's eyes tracked it. "Oh my God," Michelle whispered. "You can see." And she knew this child wasn't blind. Someone was making her blind. Before we go further, like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because sometimes God puts the right person in the right place at exactly the right time. And what Michelle uncovered next didn't just save one little girl. It exposed a conspiracy that would shake the medical world and save dozens of children from the same fate. Let's continue. 4 years before Michelle walked into that house, Julian Hudson had it all. A wife he loved more than anything, a baby on the way, a life most people only dream about. Emily was 8 months pregnant when she started having contractions at dinner. They rushed to the hospital, laughing nervously, holding hands in the car. This was it. They were about to become parents. But something went wrong during delivery. The baby's heart rate dropped. Emily started hemorrhaging. Doctors rushed in. Julian was pushed out of the room. He stood in that waiting area for 3 hours, praying harder than he'd ever prayed in his life. When the doctor finally came out, Julian knew before he even spoke. "Mr. Hudson, your daughter is alive, but your wife. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." The world stopped. Julian didn't cry, didn't scream. He just stood there, feeling his entire life collapse in on itself. Then they brought him his daughter. Tiny, fragile, wrapped in a pink blanket. She had Emily's nose, Emily's chin, and she couldn't see him. The pediatrician delivered the second blow. "Your daughter has congenital optic nerve hypoplasia. She's completely blind. I'm sorry." Julian looked down at this baby, the only piece of Emily he had left, and felt something inside him break that would never fully heal. He named her Ava. Emily had picked the name months earlier. Dr. Marcus Whitmore came to see him that same day. They'd known each other for years. He was at Julian's wedding, a trusted family friend. "I'll take care of her," Marcus promised. "We'll start treatment right away. Specialized eye drops, medications. I won't give up on her." Julian clung to those words like a lifeline. He brought Ava home to a house that felt wrong without Emily in it. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her coffee cup sat by the sink. The nursery they'd painted together now felt like a room full of broken dreams. Julian went through the motions. Feeding, diaper changes, medication, schedule eye drops 3 times a day, every day, exactly as Dr. Whitmore prescribed. But Ava didn't respond to anything. She didn't smile when he talked to her, didn't turn toward his voice, didn't reach for the toys he'd put in her crib. She just stared at nothing. Months turned into years. Julian stopped opening the curtains. Light felt like an insult when his daughter couldn't see it. He stopped having people over, stopped going to the office, started working from home, buried in conference calls that didn't matter. The staff moved quietly through the house, speaking in whispers, like they were afraid to disturb the grief that had settled into every room. Julian's days became a loop he couldn't break. Wake up, medication, doctor appointments that showed no progress, therapy sessions where Ava sat motionless, sleep, repeat. Dr. Whitmore kept adjusting the prescriptions, adding new medications, vitamin injections, neurological supplements. "These things take time," he'd say. "We're doing everything we can." But nothing changed. Ava turned 2, then 3, then 4, and she still didn't see. Still didn't smile. Still lived in a world Julian couldn't reach. He'd sit by her window sometimes, watching her small face turned toward glass she couldn't see through, and wonder if this was his punishment. If God took Emily and Ava's sight because Julian didn't deserve them. The guilt ate at him slowly. The what-ifs, the if-onlys. If only he'd gotten Emily to the hospital sooner. If only he'd chosen a different doctor. If only he'd prayed harder, tried harder, been better. 4 years of that kind of thinking turns a house into a prison. And Julian was serving a life sentence. Then one October morning, Michelle Davies walked through his door. She had sad eyes, the kind that recognized his pain without him having to explain it. When she told him she'd lost a child too, something shifted. Not hope. He'd buried that a long time ago. But something else. Something quiet. Maybe understanding. Maybe just the smallest crack in the wall he'd built around himself. He hired her, gave her the same instructions he'd given every caregiver before her. Follow Dr. Whitmore's medication schedule. Don't miss a dose. Don't get attached. But Michelle didn't follow those rules. She got attached the first day she held Ava's hand. And she started asking questions no one else had bothered to ask. Michelle's first week was all routine. Mrs. Chen walked her through everything. Ava's schedule was rigid, non-negotiable. 7 in the morning, wake up, eye drops. Breakfast with vitamin supplements mixed into her food. Mid-morning therapy exercises that Ava barely responded to. 1 o'clock, second round of eye drops. Afternoon, sensory activities, textures, sounds, things meant to stimulate a brain that seemed unreachable. 7 at night, final eye drops, neurological supplements with dinner, then bed. Every single day. For 4 years. Michelle followed the routine exactly, but she watched. She'd been a pediatric nurse long enough to know what blind children looked like, how they moved, how they responded to the world. Ava was different. On day 3, Michelle was cleaning Ava's room. She accidentally knocked a book off the shelf. It hit the floor with a soft thud. Ava's head turned before the sound. Michelle froze. Wait. She turned before it fell. She didn't say anything, just filed it away in the back of her mind. Day 5. Michelle walked into Ava's room wearing a bright yellow sweater. Ava's face changed, just slightly, like she registered something. "Hi, sweetheart," Michelle said softly. Ava tilted her head, not toward Michelle's voice, toward Michelle. It was small, but it was there. Michelle started testing things, quietly, carefully. She'd move around the room without making noise. Sometimes Ava would track her, sometimes she wouldn't. She'd open the curtains to let light in. Ava would blink, rapidly, like the brightness bothered her. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the window after days of clouds. Ava turned her face toward it and smiled. Michelle's heart skipped. Blind children could feel warmth. That was normal. But this felt like more than warmth. This felt like Ava saw the light. That night, Michelle couldn't sleep. She pulled out her laptop and started searching. Congenital blindness, reactions to light. Visual impairment, inconsistent responses. Blind children, developmental milestones. She read medical journals until 2 in the morning, watched videos of other blind children, compared their movements to Ava's. They were different. Ava was more aware, more connected, like she was trying to see through fog instead of complete darkness. Michelle looked at the medication bottles lined up on Ava's dresser, all prescribed by Dr. Whitmore. She picked one up, read the label. The names were long, medical, some she didn't recognize from nursing school. She took photos of every bottle, planned to research them later. The next day, Michelle tried something else. She brought colorful toys from the playroom, a red ball, a bright yellow stuffed duck, a blue rattle. She moved them slowly across Ava's line of sight during playtime. At first, nothing. Then the yellow duck passed by and Ava's eyes shifted, just barely, but they moved. "Oh, baby," Michelle whispered. "You see something, don't you?" She wanted to tell Julian, wanted to shake him and say, "Look at your daughter. Really, look." But she tried once. It was evening. Julian was in his study, door half open. Michelle knocked softly. "Mr. Hudson, can I ask you something?" He looked up from his computer, tired eyes barely focused. "What is it? Has Ava ever shown any response to visual things? Light? Movement?" His face hardened immediately. "No, never. The doctors were very clear. It's just, today I noticed she seemed to react when—" "Miss Davies," his voice went cold. "I've spent 4 years chasing maybes, every tiny movement, every small change, looking for signs that weren't there." He stood up, walked to the window. "I won't do that anymore. I can't. I understand, but please, just follow Dr. Whitmore's instructions. Give her the medication. Keep her comfortable. That's all I'm asking." Michelle left the study with a knot in her stomach. She went back to Ava's room, looked at that little girl sitting by the window, so still, so quiet. Something was wrong here. She felt it in her bones. That night, Michelle photographed every medication label, every dosage, every instruction. She didn't know what she was looking for yet, but she was going to find out. Because if there was even a chance, even the smallest possibility that Ava could see, Michelle wasn't going to let it go. She'd already lost one child. She wasn't going to watch another one disappear without a fight. Michelle waited until the house went quiet. Julian was in his study. Door closed. The staff had gone home for the night. Just her and Ava and the weight of a question she couldn't shake. She pulled out her laptop, opened the photos of the medication labels, started typing the names into medical databases. The first one came up: atropine sulfate ophthalmic drops, used for dilating pupils during eye exams. Standard dose, 0.01%. Michelle scrolled down to Ava's prescription strength, 0.5%. Her stomach dropped. That was 50 times stronger than normal. She kept reading. Side effects: severe light sensitivity, blurred vision, prolonged pupil dilation, in high doses, vision impairment. No, Michelle whispered. No, no, no. She checked the other medications. The vitamin supplements contained mild sedatives. The neurological medications were suppressants, things that dulled reflexes, made a child lethargic. Every single prescription worked together. Not to heal, to numb, to blind, to keep Ava in the dark. Michelle's hands shook as she stared at the screen. This wasn't treatment. This was poison. But why? Why would a doctor do this? She thought about Dr. Whitmore, Julian's friend, trusted, respected. Then she thought about the bills she'd seen on Julian's desk. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, insurance covering most of it, endless treatments, endless medications. A child who never got better meant ongoing care, ongoing payments. Her chest tightened. Oh my God, he's doing this on purpose. Michelle closed the laptop, stood up, paced her room. She needed proof, real proof, not just research and suspicion. She needed to show Julian something undeniable. She grabbed a flashlight from her nightstand and walked down the hall to Ava's room. The little girl was awake, sitting up in bed, staring toward the window where moonlight filtered through thin curtains. "Hey, baby," Michelle whispered. "Can't sleep?" Ava didn't answer, just turned her head slightly. Michelle knelt beside the bed. "I'm going to try something, okay? Don't be scared." She clicked on the flashlight, kept it low at first, moved it slowly from left to right. Ava blinked. Her eyes followed the beam. Michelle's breath caught. She moved it again, faster this time. Ava's head turned, following, tracking. "You can see it," Michelle breathed. "Can't you, sweetheart?" She made the light dance on the wall. A circle, a zigzag. And Ava smiled, a real, genuine smile. She reached out with both hands, trying to touch the light. Tears streamed down Michelle's face. "Oh, baby girl. Oh, my sweet girl." Then Ava did something that broke Michelle completely. She looked right at Michelle, focused, clear, and whispered, "Mama?" Michelle pulled her close, held her tight. "I'm here. I'm right here." "Mama," Ava said again, stronger this time. "Pretty light." "Yes, baby, it's pretty. And you can see it. You can see." Michelle rocked her gently, crying into her hair. "I'm going to save you. I promise. No more medicine that hurts you. No more darkness." She pulled back, looked at Ava's face in the dim light. Those pale blue eyes weren't blank anymore. They were looking at her, really looking. "I see you," Ava whispered. "I see you too, Angel." That's when Michelle heard footsteps in the hallway. She turned. Julian stood in the doorway. His face was white, confused, then angry. He looked at the flashlight in Michelle's hand, the printed research papers on the dresser, the way Ava was looking at Michelle, really looking. "What the hell are you doing to my daughter?" Michelle stood slowly, heart pounding. This was it. Everything was about to change. "Mr. Hudson," she said quietly, "I need you to listen to me. Your daughter isn't blind. Get out. She can see. And the medication you've been giving her. I said get out of my house. Michelle picked up the flashlight, turned it on, held it in front of Ava. The little girl smiled, reached toward the light, her eyes tracking it perfectly. Julian's legs buckled. He grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. That's not. She can't. His voice broke. The doctors said. Michelle's voice was steady, gentle. The doctors lied. Julian sank to the floor. Just dropped to his knees right there in the doorway. He stared at his daughter, at the way her eyes followed the light, the way she reached for it, smiled at it. 4 years of darkness, and she could see. I don't understand, he whispered. They told me. Marcus told me. Michelle knelt beside him, handed him the printed research. Look at these medications. Really, look. Julian's hands shook as he read, his eyes scanning the words, the dosages, the side effects. Severe light sensitivity, blurred vision, vision impairment. No, he breathed. No, this has to be wrong. It's not wrong, Mr. Hudson. These aren't treating her, they're hurting her. Julian looked up at Michelle. His eyes were red, broken. Marcus prescribed these. He was at my wedding. He held Ava when she was born. He's my friend. I know. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. The years of no progress, the endless appointments, the massive bills. Always more medications, always more treatments, never any results. Julian's voice cracked. Oh God, what have I done? This isn't your fault. I gave her this poison, every day, for 4 years. I trusted him and His words dissolved into sobs. Michelle put a hand on his shoulder. You trusted a doctor. That's what parents do. I should have questioned it. Should have. You were grieving. You were drowning. You did what you thought was right. Julian looked at Ava. She was watching him now, really watching. Her little face turned toward his voice, her eyes trying to focus. Daddy, she whispered. Julian's whole body went still. He stared at her. What did you say? Daddy. Clearer this time. He crawled to her bedside, took her small hands in his. Baby, can you see me? Ava squinted. Her vision wasn't clear, but she was looking at him, at his face. Daddy's sad, she said softly. Julian broke completely, pulled her into his arms and sobbed into her hair. 4 years of silence. 4 years of believing she'd never know him, never see his face, never say his name. And she'd just said, Daddy. Michelle backed away quietly, gave them space, watched this father hold his daughter like he was afraid she'd disappear. After a long moment, Julian looked up. His face was wet, raw. What do we do? He asked. If we stop the medications, what if it hurts her? What if we don't stop them? Michelle said gently. What if every day we wait, we're hurting her more? Julian looked at the medication bottles on the dresser, all lined up. 4 years of routine. He stood slowly, walked over, picked them up one by one. No more, he said quietly. No more of this. He looked at Michelle. Starting tomorrow. We stop everything. What about Dr. Whitmore? Julian's jaw tightened. I'll deal with Marcus. But even as he said it, something cold settled in his chest. If Marcus had done this deliberately, if he'd been poisoning Ava for years, then this wasn't just malpractice. This was something darker. Mr. Hudson, Michelle said carefully, if he did this on purpose, we need to be careful. We need proof. Julian nodded. His mind was already spinning, already thinking through what came next. But right now, in this moment, only one thing mattered. He turned back to Ava. She was still looking at him, still trying to focus on his face. Hi, baby girl, he whispered. Hi, Daddy. And for the first time in 4 years, Julian Hudson felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Hope. The first morning, without medication, Julian didn't sleep at all. He sat in a chair beside Ava's bed, watching her breathe, terrified. What if Michelle was wrong? What if stopping the medication made things worse? But when Ava woke up, something was different. Her eyes opened clearer, more focused. She looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. "Daddy?" Julian leaned forward. "I'm here, baby." "Window," she pointed. "Bright." Julian's throat tightened. She could see the window, see the morning light coming through. "Yes, sweetheart, that's the sun." Ava smiled. A real smile, not the blank, distant expression he'd seen for years. She was waking up. By day 3, the changes were undeniable. Ava started reaching for things. Her cup, her stuffed bear, the blanket on her bed. Not guessing, actually reaching for what she saw. Michelle brought her colorful picture books. Ava pointed at the images. Red, blue, yellow. "That's right, baby," Michelle said, tears in her eyes. "Those are colors. Pretty colors." Julian watched from the doorway, watched his daughter come alive in ways he'd stopped believing were possible. She wasn't just seeing light anymore. She was seeing shapes, colors, faces. One afternoon, Ava walked to the window by herself, put her small hand on the glass. "Daddy, what's that?" She pointed outside. Julian came to stand beside her. "Those are trees, sweetheart, and flowers." "Mama's flowers?" His breath caught. "How did you?" Ava pointed to a photo on her dresser. Emily in a red dress, standing in the garden. "You told me, before. You said Mama loved flowers." Julian knelt down, looked at his daughter's face. She was looking back at him, really looking. "You remember that?" "I couldn't see before, but I heard. I always heard you, Daddy." He pulled her close. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't know." "It's okay." She patted his face with her small hand. "I can see now." Michelle found them like that, father and daughter, holding each other by the window. She didn't interrupt, just watched, and felt her own heart breaking and healing at the same time. Later that evening, after Ava fell asleep, Julian and Michelle sat in the living room. The house felt different now, lighter, like something had shifted. "I tried calling Marcus today," Julian said quietly. "His office said he's unavailable." "Unavailable?" "On sabbatical. No return date. No way to reach him." Michelle's stomach turned. "That's convenient." Julian looked at her. "You think he knows? That we figured it out?" "I don't know, but it's strange timing." Julian stood, walked to the window. 4 years, Michelle. 4 years I paid him millions, trusted him with my daughter's life. And he was. He couldn't finish the sentence. "We need to find out if there are others," Michelle said softly. Julian turned. "Others?" "Other children, other families. If he did this to Ava, what if she's not the only one?" The thought made Julian sick. "How do we find out?" "I can reach out. Online support groups for parents of blind children. See if anyone else was treated by Dr. Whitmore." Julian nodded slowly. "Do it. And I'll hire investigators, financial experts. If Marcus was billing insurance for fraudulent treatments, there'll be a paper trail." Michelle stood. "Mr. Hudson." "Julian, please, after everything. Just call me Julian." She nodded. "Julian, if we do this, if we go after him, it's going to get ugly." "I know. He'll fight back. People like that always do." Julian's eyes hardened. "Let him fight. He poisoned my daughter. He stole 4 years of her life. 4 years of mine." His voice dropped. "I don't care how powerful he is. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to make sure he never does this to another child." Michelle saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not just grief anymore. Anger, purpose, fire. "Then we do this together," she said. Julian looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life a month ago, who'd seen what no one else saw, who'd saved his daughter when he couldn't. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on her." "I couldn't give up on her. She reminded me too much of." She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Julian understood. "Your son." Michelle nodded. "I couldn't save him, but maybe I could save her." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 broken people who'd found purpose in each other's pain. Then Julian's phone buzzed. Unknown number, text message. He opened it. His face went pale. "What is it?" Michelle asked. Julian showed her the screen. "Stop asking questions. You don't know what you're interfering with." Another message came through. Some people don't wake up from the darkness. Be careful yours doesn't go back to sleep. Michelle's blood ran cold. He's threatening Ava. Julian's hand clenched around the phone. Then he just made the biggest mistake of his life. Michelle found 3 families online. 3 mothers who mentioned Dr. Marcus Whitmore by name, all in Connecticut, all desperate for answers about their blind children. She reached out to one, a woman named Sarah Bennett. They met at a coffee shop in Hartford 2 days later. Sarah brought files, medical records, bills, photographs of her 5-year-old son, James. Dr. Whitmore said James was born blind, Sarah explained, hands wrapped around her coffee cup. We've been seeing him since James was 3 months old. Michelle's chest tightened. What medications is he on? Sarah pulled out a list. Michelle's hands went cold as she read it. The same prescriptions, the exact same dosages, everything Ava had been taking. How much have you spent? Michelle asked quietly. Close to $2 million. The insurance covers most of it. But, Sarah's voice cracked, we've done everything he told us. Every treatment, every medication. Nothing's worked. Michelle reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. Has James ever responded to light? Sarah hesitated. Sometimes I think. But Dr. Whitmore says I'm imagining things. That false hope is cruel. You're not imagining it. Michelle told her everything. About Ava, the medications, the research, how Ava's vision was coming back after they stopped the treatments. Sarah's face went pale. You're saying Marcus has been blinding my son? I'm saying you need to get a second opinion from a doctor who isn't connected to Dr. Whitmore. Sarah started crying, right there in the coffee shop. Quiet, broken sobs. 5 years, she whispered. 5 years I've trusted him. Michelle held her hand tighter. I know. I'm so sorry. When Michelle got home, Julian was waiting in the living room. I found something, he said. His voice was hollow. He showed her the investigator's report. Dr. Whitmore had treated 14 children in the past 7 years, all diagnosed as incurably blind, all on similar medication regimens, all from wealthy families or families with extensive insurance coverage. 14 children, Julian said. 14. Michelle sank onto the couch. Oh my God. The billing records show millions. Insurance claims for experimental treatments, medications that cost thousands per month. Julian's hands were shaking. He created patients who'd never get better, children who'd need care for life. It's not just malpractice, Michelle whispered. It's evil. Julian's voice was hard, cold. That's what it is. They sat in silence, the weight of it crushing. 14 children, 14 families, years of stolen sight, stolen hope. We have to tell someone, Michelle said. The police, the medical board, someone. I already called my attorney. He's connecting us with the FBI, white-collar crime division. Michelle looked at him. The FBI? This is fraud on a massive scale. Insurance fraud, medical fraud, and, his voice dropped, child endangerment. Another text came through on Julian's phone. Unknown number again. Last warning. Walk away, or everyone gets hurt. Julian showed it to Michelle. He's scared. That's why he's threatening us. Or he's dangerous. I don't care. Julian's eyes were fierce. He hurt my daughter. He hurt other children. I'm not backing down. Michelle thought about Ava, about Sarah's son, about 12 other children out there still taking those medications, still living in darkness they didn't have to live in. Neither am I, she said. That night, Michelle checked on Ava before bed. The little girl was asleep, curled up with her stuffed bear, her face peaceful, no longer blank. Michelle sat on the edge of the bed, brushed hair from Ava's forehead. You're safe now, baby, she whispered. I promise. But even as she said it, fear coiled in her stomach. Dr. Whitmore was out there somewhere, watching, threatening, and they were about to go to war with him. Michelle thought about her son, the 11 days she'd had with him, how she'd prayed for a miracle that never came. Maybe this was her miracle, not bringing her son back, but saving someone else's child. Saving 14 children. She kissed Ava's forehead. I won't let him hurt you again. When she left the room, Julian was standing in the hallway. Can't sleep either? He asked. No. They walked downstairs together, sat in the dim living room. I keep thinking about Emily, Julian said quietly, about what she'd say if she knew. What would she say? That, I should have seen it sooner, should have protected Ava better. Michelle shook her head. She'd say you're protecting her now. That's what matters. Julian looked at her, really looked. You saved her life, Michelle. You know that, right? We saved her. Together. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding. Connection. Two people who'd lost everything, who'd found purpose in each other's pain. Whatever happens next, Julian said, I'm glad you're here. Michelle nodded. Me too. Outside, the night was quiet. But inside, everything was about to break, wide open. Michelle reached out to two more families. Both had children under Dr. Whitmore's care, both on the same medications, both told their children would never see. One mother, Lisa Chen, agreed to meet them at Julian's house. She came with her husband and her 3-year-old daughter, Emma. The little girl sat in her father's lap, motionless, staring at nothing. Michelle's heart broke looking at her. We've been seeing Dr. Whitmore for 2 years, Lisa said. Her voice was tired, defeated. He told us Emma has no optic nerve development, that nothing can be done. Julian leaned forward. Have you ever noticed her responding to light, to movement? Lisa hesitated. Sometimes, but the doctor says it's just reflexes, not real vision. Michelle knelt in front of Emma, pulled out a small flashlight. May I? She asked the parents. They nodded. Michelle clicked it on, moved it slowly in front of Emma's face. The little girl's eyes followed it. Lisa gasped. She can see it, Michelle said gently. Lisa started crying. Her husband put his arm around her, his own eyes wet. 2 years, Lisa whispered. 2 years we've been giving her those medications. Julian showed them the research, the lab reports, the dosage information. These aren't helping her, he said quietly. They're keeping her blind. By the end of the week, they'd found 7 families. 7 children, all between ages 2 and 6, all diagnosed as incurably blind. All prescribed the same toxic combination of medications. Julian's investigators uncovered the financial trail. Dr. Whitmore had billed insurance companies over $40 million across 15 years. $40 million for treatments that didn't work, for medications that caused harm instead of healing. The FBI opened an investigation, but Dr. Whitmore was still missing. No one knew where he was. And the threats kept coming. Julian's car was keyed in a parking garage. Someone hacked into his email. Fake articles appeared online calling him a bitter father trying to destroy a respected doctor's career. Michelle received messages on her phone. You're going to regret this. Leave it alone. Accidents happen. One morning, Michelle came downstairs to find Ava sitting at the kitchen table with Julian. They were looking at a picture book together. Ava was pointing at the images, naming colors. That's green, Daddy, like the trees outside. That's right, baby. Ava looked up and saw Michelle. Her whole face lit up. Mama! She'd started calling Michelle that a week ago, and every time, it made Michelle's chest ache in the best way. Good morning, sweetheart. Ava ran to her, wrapped her small arms around Michelle's legs. I love you, Mama. Michelle picked her up, held her close. I love you too, baby girl. Julian watched them, something soft in his expression. Later, after Ava went to play in her room, Julian poured coffee for both of them. She's getting stronger every day, he said. I know. Her vision's still not perfect, but she can see colors now, shapes, faces. Michelle nodded. It's a miracle. No, Julian looked at her. You're the miracle. You saved her when I couldn't. You would have figured it out eventually. No, I wouldn't have. His voice was honest, raw. I'd given up. I was just existing, going through motions. He set down his cup. You brought life back into this house, into my daughter, into me. Michelle felt her throat tighten. I don't know how to thank you, Julian continued. How to even begin to. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. He stepped closer. Michelle, you've given me everything back. My daughter, my hope, my reason to keep going. Something shifted in the air between them. "I know this isn't the time," Julian said quietly. "We're in the middle of a fight. Everything's chaos. But I need you to know." He paused, searched for words. "You're not just Ava's caregiver anymore. You're family. You're everything." Michelle's eyes filled with tears. 6 months ago, she'd been drowning in grief, certain she'd never feel whole again. Now she stood in this kitchen with this man and his daughter and felt something she thought was gone forever. Purpose, connection, love. "You're my family too," she whispered. Julian reached out, took her hand. They stood like that for a moment, two broken people who'd found healing in each other. Then Ava's voice called from upstairs, "Mama, Daddy, come see." They went upstairs together, found Ava standing at her window, pointing outside. "Look, the flowers are blooming." Julian and Michelle looked out at Emily's garden, the one that had been overgrown and forgotten for years. Spring had brought it back to life. Tulips, daffodils, colors everywhere. "Your mama planted those," Julian told Ava softly. "They're beautiful," Ava said. Then she looked up at Michelle. "Can we go outside? I want to see them up close." Michelle smiled through tears. "Yes, baby, we can go see them." The three of them walked down to the garden together. Ava ran ahead, laughing, touching the flowers, marveling at colors she'd spent years unable to see. Julian stood beside Michelle, watching his daughter discover the world. "Emily would have loved this," he said quietly. "I think she's watching," Michelle replied. "I think she knows Ava's okay now." Julian took Michelle's hand, squeezed it. They stood in Emily's garden, watching Ava spin in the sunlight, and felt something neither had felt in years. Peace. But they both knew this peace wouldn't last. The fight was just beginning, and Dr. Marcus Whitmore was still out there, hiding, planning, waiting. The story hit the New York Times on a Tuesday morning. Prominent pediatric ophthalmologist accused of deliberately blinding children in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. By noon, it was everywhere. Every news channel, every website, social media exploding with outrage. Julian's phone rang non-stop. Reporters, lawyers, parents from across the country asking if their children had been victims too. Michelle sat with Ava in the living room, trying to keep her calm while chaos erupted outside. News vans lined the street, cameras pointed at the house. "Mama, why are all those people here?" Ava asked. Michelle pulled her close. "Because we're helping other children, baby. Children like you. Children who couldn't see?" "Yes, sweetheart." Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad they're going to see now too." Michelle kissed the top of her head. This child who'd suffered for 4 years was worried about other children. Julian came in from his study. His face was tight. They found him. Michelle looked up. "Whitmore." FBI picked him up at a private airport in New Jersey. He was trying to leave the country. Relief and rage warred in Michelle's chest. "Good. There's more." Julian sat down heavily. "They found records. 14 children confirmed. Maybe more. And it wasn't just him." "What do you mean?" "2 other doctors were involved, and a pharmaceutical company executive. They had deals, kickbacks, create lifelong patients, split the insurance money." Michelle felt sick. How could they? "I don't know." Julian's voice was hollow. "I don't understand how people do this." The next few weeks were a blur. Dr. Whitmore was charged with 47 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The trial was set for 4 months out. But more families kept coming forward. 19 children total. 19 families destroyed by greed disguised as medicine. Julian and Michelle were asked to testify before Congress, a hearing on medical fraud and patient protections. They sat at a long table, microphones in front of them, cameras everywhere. Julian spoke first, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "My daughter spent 4 years in darkness because a man I trusted saw her as a paycheck, not a child, not a human being, a revenue stream." He paused, gathered himself. "How many other children are out there right now, taking medications that hurt instead of heal, trapped in systems that profit from their pain?" The room was silent. Then Michelle spoke. "I lost my son 6 months before I met Ava, and I thought that pain, that grief had no purpose, that it was just emptiness. Her voice caught. But God put me in that house for a reason. He gave me eyes to see what others missed, not because I'm special, but because I'd already lost everything. So I had nothing left to lose by asking questions. She looked directly at the camera. If you're a parent and something feels wrong, trust that. Ask questions. Demand answers. Don't let anyone tell you that your instincts don't matter. The hearing ended with standing applause. That night, Julian found Michelle in Emily's garden. She was sitting on a bench, watching Ava chase fireflies in the twilight. "You were amazing today," he said, sitting beside her. "So were you." They watched Ava together, her laughter filling the air, her eyes tracking the blinking lights. "I never thought I'd hear her laugh like that," Julian said quietly. "She's free now. Because of you." Michelle shook her head. "Because God didn't give up on her. Even when we couldn't see the way forward, He did." Julian took her hand. "Michelle, I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him. "When Emily died, I thought my life was over, that the best parts were behind me." His voice was thick with emotion. "But you brought light back into the darkest place I've ever been. Julian, I love you." The words came out raw, honest. "I love the way you love my daughter, the way you fought for her, the way you see the world." Tears slid down Michelle's cheeks. "I know it's complicated," he continued. "I know we've been through hell together, but I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore." Michelle touched his face. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Will you stay? Not as Ava's caregiver, as my partner, my family." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Ava ran over, breathless and smiling. "Mama, Daddy, did you see the lights?" Julian scooped her up. "We saw, baby girl. They're so pretty. Everything's so pretty now." Michelle wrapped her arms around both of them. And standing there in that garden, the three of them together, she felt it. Redemption. Not the kind that erases pain, but the kind that transforms it into something beautiful. Something worth fighting for. Dr. Marcus Whitmore was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The judge's words were final. "You betrayed the most sacred trust in medicine. You harmed children for profit. This court shows you no mercy." Julian sat in that courtroom with Michelle beside him and felt something release in his chest. Not joy, not satisfaction, just closure. Justice had been served, but it couldn't give back the years, couldn't undo the damage. All they could do was move forward. 6 months later, Julian and Michelle stood in Emily's garden. The same garden where Julian had proposed. This time, folding chairs lined the grass. Close friends, the families they'd helped, the prosecutors who'd fought for justice, and Ava wearing a white dress with flowers in her hair holding a basket of petals. The officiant began. "We're gathered here today to witness the joining of two people who found each other in the darkest season of their lives." Julian looked at Michelle. She was crying already. Happy tears this time. He took her hands. "I thought I'd lost everything," he said, his voice thick. "My wife, my hope, my daughter's future. But God had a plan I couldn't see. He brought you into our lives when we needed you most, and somewhere along the way, you became my everything." Michelle squeezed his hands. "I thought my pain had no purpose, that losing my son was just senseless tragedy." Her voice broke. "But God used that grief to save your daughter, to save other children. He took my broken heart and made it into something that could heal." She wiped her eyes. "You and Ava didn't just give me a family. You gave me a reason to believe again." When they kissed, Ava cheered loudest of all, threw petals in the air that she could finally see. Later, at the reception, Sarah Bennett approached them with her son James. The little boy was wearing glasses now, running around with other kids, laughing. "He starts school next month," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "Real school, with other kids, because of you." "Because we all fought together," Michelle replied. Other families came, shared their stories, their children's progress. Emma Chen was painting now, colors everywhere, making up for lost time. A 6-year-old boy named Michael was learning to read, large print books, but reading. Not every child regained full vision. The damage had been done. But they were all seeing more than they had, living more fully. And new laws were being passed because of them. Mandatory second opinions, prescription oversight, patient protections. Ava's Law, they called it in New York. One life saved had become dozens. Dozens had become systemic change. That evening, after the guests left, Julian and Michelle stood at Ava's bedroom door. She was asleep, her stuffed bear tucked under one arm, moonlight streaming through the window she'd spent years sitting beside in darkness. "I used to stand here and pray for a miracle," Julian whispered, begged God to heal her. "He did," Michelle said softly, "just not the way you expected." Julian pulled her close. "He sent you." They adopted Ava together the following month, made Michelle her legal mother in every way. When the judge finalized it, Ava threw her arms around Michelle's neck. "You're really my mama now. I've always been your mama, baby. Now it's just official." 1 year later, Michelle found Julian in his study late at night. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking." He gestured to his computer screen. The Emily Hudson Foundation website, testimonials from families they'd helped, photos of children who were thriving now. 23 children recovered partial vision. 14 families received financial restitution. Laws changed in 8 states. He looked at Michelle. "All because you refused to look away. All because God put me exactly where I needed to be." She sat on his lap, rested her head against his. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "My son lived 11 days. That's all I got. But those 11 days taught me to recognize suffering, to fight for children who can't fight for themselves." Her voice was gentle. "He had a purpose. Even though he's gone, his life meant something." Julian kissed her forehead. He'd be proud of his mama. They went upstairs together, checked on Ava one more time. She was sprawled across her bed now, growing so fast. 7 years old, 1st grade, art class twice a week, friends who came over for playdates. A normal childhood, the one she'd almost been robbed of. Michelle tucked the blanket around her, kissed her forehead, and thought about all the paths that led here, the grief, the loss, the questions that wouldn't stay quiet. She'd lost a son, but gained a daughter, lost her way, but found her purpose. God hadn't erased her pain. He'd transformed it, made it into something that could save others, heal others, change the world just a little bit. That's what love does, real love, the kind that costs something. It doesn't erase darkness, it becomes light inside it. And sometimes when we're broken enough to let Him, God uses our pain to write the most beautiful stories. Stories about sight restored, hope renewed, families healed. Stories about ordinary people who refuse to accept that darkness is permanent. Who fight, who question, who love fiercely, even when it hurts. Michelle turned off Ava's light, closed the door softly. Tomorrow, Ava would wake up to sunlight, to colors, to a world she could finally see. And Michelle would wake up beside the man she loved, in a house that felt like home, with a daughter who called her Mama. Not because life was perfect, but because God took their broken pieces and made them into something whole, something beautiful, something that looked exactly like redemption,